This is Autohaus Hamilton TV. I'm James, and today I'm talking spark plugs. Spark plugs do their best work under pressure. A great deal of pressure as it happens, because at the time when the spark plug sparks, they're typically under approximately 10 times atmospheric pressure. That high pressure is one of the reasons why a spark plug needs such a high voltage in order to make the spark jump the gap. So we'll start by having a look at how a spark plug is made. So there are a number of key elements in the design of the spark plug. Let's go through them. So at the top of the spark plug, we've got the connector where positive current is applied. We've got an insulator which runs through the spark plug and underneath the threaded portion. The threaded portion earths to the engine block, and there's an electrode and a gap, and that gap is where the spark has to jump. Other points to note, there's a compression washer which ensures gas tight sealing, and also the ribs on the insulator are there to increase the distance between the connector and the earthed portion, which in turn increases the resistance, makes it harder for current to escape across the resistor and run to ground, which we don't want happening. What we want to happen is for all of the current to go down the central part of the spark plug through to the electrode and jump the gap. If that gap is set lower than optimum, then it's very easy for a spark to bridge the gap. So the spark can take place easily, but it's going to be a weak and puny spark. If the gap is too large, on the other hand, you end up with effectively an air resistor, and the spark can't bridge the gap at all. Somewhere in between those two extremes, you get a point where you get a nice big fat juicy spark and ignition can take place. It's also worth having a look at the difference between a traditional spark plug design, such as this one, which has a single electrode, or a more modern spark plug design, such as this one here, which has a number of electrodes. In this case, we've got 4 electrodes around the circumference. Now, you might think that that means that each of those 4 electrodes allows for a spark, but what actually happens is only one of those electrodes is used on any one spark. What actually happens is that electricity always takes the path of least resistance, which means that only one electrode sparks, and over time those sparks erode the electrode. So once an electrode wears to the point where it's no longer closest to the center electrode, then the next closest electrode takes over. It's probably true to say that for any spark plug, the single most important attribute is its heat value. Now, you'll hear people talking about hot plugs or warm plugs and cool plugs, and plugs being hotter or colder than one another, but what does that actually mean, and how is it built into a spark plug? So a hot spark plug or a warm spark plug is one that allows heat to build up on the nose of the spark plug. A cool spark plug is one that conducts heat away quickly to the engine block. A hot spark plug retains heat, and a cool spark plug sheds heat quicker. That's achieved through the construction of this insulator. That insulator runs through the plug. On a cool plug, the insulator runs closer to the nose of the plug, and on a hot plug, the insulator is shorter. So we'll use this very handy measuring device that I've cunningly manufactured, and we'll have a look at this spark plug. And what we'll see is, if we do this right, that index mark comes to the top of the spark plug's outer electrode. So that gives us some idea of the shape of the nose. So somewhere roughly where the end of that paper marker is, that's where the insulating nose reaches to on this spark plug. If we have a look at a different spark plug, and this is a spark plug in the same range, all that's different is the heat number. If we have a look at this spark plug, what we can see is that that insulating nose comes much further up in the spark plug, because we can see our index mark is clearly exposed. So this plug, which has a shorter insulator, is going to be a cooler plug. It's going to give more heat back into the engine block, and the plug we looked at first is going to be a warmer plug. Now, why does that matter? If you're using a plug that is too cool, what happens is that on this on the insulator in the center, you'll get deposits building up and the plug will foul itself, and that's never a good thing. If you've got an optimum heat plug, once the engine's up to operating temperature, that nose is hot enough to burn off any deposits and the plug stays nice and clean, doesn't get fouled up. Earlier I said that a plug that is too cold will end up fouling, but what happens if you use a plug that's too hot? Well, a plug that's too hot, remember, that's going to retain more heat, and that's going to be a heat source within the cylinder, and you run the risk of premature detonation, and nobody wants premature detonation. It's not a good thing. If the spark plug becomes a hot spot and allows for pre-ignition to take place, what will happen is you'll get pinking or pinging or knocking, depending on what you think the correct term ought to be, and if that continues unchecked, you can burn the piston. Finally, a word about spark plugs for diesel engines. The thing with spark plugs for diesel engines is there aren't any, and that's because whereas a petrol engine is a spark ignition engine, a diesel engine is a compression ignition engine. What happens in a diesel engine with its very high compression ratios is that the air-fuel mixture reaches its flash point, and at that point ignition takes place without the need for a spark plug. As ever, thank you very much for watching. It's probably blah, 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 blah.